companies. We have 15 portfolio businesses, some of which are in the hospitality sector, mainly by way of foods that are sold into restaurants through food service, but we also have some technology companies. Some of you may be familiar with Open City, which is a drive-through API. It's one of our companies. Happy to share more about it. But anyway, today's conversation is really about automation in restaurants and what the future may hold. And as I was speaking with David and Aaron last week preparing for this panel, we were thinking about it, saying, automation isn't really that new in restaurants. Over the last couple of decades, there's been a lot of developments, particularly, point of sale, front of house, how we're thinking about, service. But as we think about restaurants more holistically and as we move into the future, what are some of those areas within the restaurant experience, front of house and back of house, that we can benefit from more automation and we can adopt as we try to drive efficiency and use our resources in the best way in these environments. So before we get started, I'm actually curious who's in the crowd today. So can you raise your hand if you're a chef, owner, operator? Okay. Can you raise your hand if you're an innovator? You started a company that's providing services for restaurants? Okay. Students, others that are, okay, great. Awesome. Any others that I've missed that you guys want to know about?
Chefs.
Any chefs? All right, cool. Perfect. That's helpful for our panelists and for me as we kind of navigate the Q&A and make sure that we're, I'm asking questions, but also we're providing them in the context that would be most helpful for you. So let's get started. Why don't we start quickly with introductions? And in addition to the introductions, we have a couple of slides that help bring the companies that our panelists here today are bringing to life. So let me skip this. And first, we're going to start with let's start with Dexai first. All right. So, which video would you like me to show? Oh, you want me to go to the back? Okay. So that is, we'll stay there. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, so why don't you give your intro and then we'll do the video.
Perfect. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you, Lauren. We're thrilled to be talking to an audience of folks who are really interested in how to change the restaurant. So at Dexai, we build robots that go into existing kitchens, which can prepare the same recipes using the same ingredients in actually the same space that you already use today. So if you could go to the next slide. There's nothing like seeing it in action. So this is an installation at one of our customers making an order, which then ended up being served to a customer. So what you can see here is a robot which is sitting on an existing lowboy, and it's an arm which attaches itself to utensils which are stored in the food to meet serve-safe requirements. And it's making a custom order, so every order is dictated by what the customer would like, and the robot is preparing the meal according to the recipe which is designed by the chef. So in this case, it's a chopped salad in a Mediterranean style restaurant, and the robot is precisely portioning the ingredients according to what the recipe calls for. And we're able to do this because the robot is actually quite smart. It has a camera, it has weight sensors, it's actually weighing every ingredient and deciding what to do in real time. So it looks at the container just like a human chef would do and decides where to go and where to pick in order to make the meal. So we have these deployed, and we make food for customers every day. We found a lot of really great traction in preparing grab-and-go meals. So sitting in the back of a kitchen, making hundreds of salads a day with very little human intervention. So you have chefs who are overseeing the robot, but really the robot just does its thing, drops the meals off, and at the end of the day you have hundreds of meals that can go out into a refrigeration unit and be sold.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Okay, we'll do our next introduction here, and this is a video.
Yes, we have an introduction slide that you can go to.
There we go.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. So my name is Aaron and I am one of our sales directors on the East Coast for Bear Robotics. And we're introducing today Servi, who's here with us actually stage side. And what we do is Servi is a food running, busing, hosting, front of house hospitality robot. And we have a really customizable approach. Our mission is to kind of automate some of the hustle, the back and forth, to keep servers on the floor and increase human interaction, customer service. So we have a quick video that kind of highlights what I was just showing.
Giving your guests the best experience possible is your top priority. What if your staff always had a helping hand when they needed it to make the busy work easier? Now there's Servi. Program as many destinations as you need, and Servi will get there every time. Servi can navigate the tightest spots and unexpected obstacles. Your staff gets what they need faster without multiple trips, and they work well together. Let Servi take on the heavy lifting while they do the important work. Servi is the help they need so your team can work smarter, not harder, and have more time to take care of the important things.
Happy birthday!
Because it's the little things that can make all the difference.
Yeah, so that's Servi, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Again, our goal is, and we have actual customers here, Bill, in the audience, so people who could actually speak to Servi operating day to day. The goal is leaving the humans to do the human work, doing more with less. Labor's a challenge, and when you can keep servers on the floor and you can kind of shuttle things back and forth, whether it's dirty dishes or food, that's our goal. So glad to talk more about it today.
Excellent. Excuse me. Well, thank you both for those videos. Very helpful to see. I had no idea that the robot actually speaks, so that's really cool. We could dive into that a little bit more, but I want to just start out with sort of a state of the industry question and what inspired you to start this company. So, can you talk a little bit about why you started, when you started, and sort of the change that you've seen the industry go through in the years that you've been running these businesses? So, David, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's like, why start a food automation company in the first place? Well, we've been around about 4 years now, and as you know, the industry was very different 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we were thinking, well, hey, it would be great if we could make it a little easier to help chefs produce hundreds of meals with less work. But that has changed substantially, right, since we had the pandemic, and we're seeing dramatic changes in the labor force. And so what we're really thinking, or our mission at Dexai, is to make the lives of chefs easier, right? We're trying to make it so that you can produce hundreds of meals by yourself when before it would take several folks. And that's just trying to really address the fact that it's very, very difficult to get continuous staffing in food production. And it's just a challenge across the entire industry.
Thank you.
Yeah, so piggybacking off of that, it's again, I didn't found my company, but I am a chef. I went to I've always worked in restaurants and different types of food service establishments. It's an ever-changing landscape, as many of you know, and specifically we focus on front of house. And what we want to do is we want to kind of enable operators to do more with less, and really just allow staffing patterns to have more flexibility. When you can repurpose people in your operation and you have a workflow that is pliable to sorts, you can really leverage robotics to do some easier tasks, and again, flex your hourly staff to just do more human interaction.
So as you think about the types of restaurants that are best suited to the automation and the robots that you've both created, based on your vision, what are those restaurants that you think are best suited to this type of technology? Which are the early adopters, and which do you see sort of eventually getting there in terms of adoption?
Yeah, it's always a challenge to know where you put automation first. And our vision really at Dexai is that we'll be everywhere in the kitchen, but we're starting really with back-of-house production, and specifically with grab-and-go production, where it's a job that is very consistent, very repetitive, and you need to produce really huge quantities of food. So take, for example, one of our customers, which is a self-operated hospital system. They have to produce thousands and thousands of grab-and-go meals a day, and they were struggling with the prices that they had to pay to purchase them pre-made, and they couldn't find enough staff. They had the space and the capacity to produce themselves, but they just really couldn't find the staff to do it. So it was a product that they were missing, that they couldn't produce, that they really wanted. They had incredible demand for, but just had no way to actually do it. And they found that automation was really the solution for them, that they could go out and actually provide what their customers wanted in this world of really limited staffing. And we see that really across our user base, that this is about providing guests for what they're looking for when you just are unable to provide the service with your existing staff.
Yeah, we've had similar growths and challenges as we kind of tap into new markets. Majority of our robots today are in full service restaurants, meaning you have food runners, bussers, expediters, servers, hosts, hostesses. So we are etching our way into fast casual restaurants, quick service restaurants that you order at a counter and you just pick your table. So it really comes down to who has what it takes and who could manage the change when we're implementing robotics. So some people are more flexible than others. They are okay with using table tents or KDS screens and implementing robotics. But we try to have an all-inclusive plug-and-play solution. We're also in a lot of different verticals like healthcare, David mentioned, hospitality, retirement communities, country clubs. Anywhere that we could provide any kind of solution, we explore it. We even have things outside of food service, which doesn't really lend to this show, but we're in a car dealership that we're actually shuttling parts from a parts desk to the workers, their service bays. Like these service techs are sitting and working on cars all day, and apparently they had an issue where these guys were going to the parts desk and waiting 20 minutes to wait for a part, but they could have gotten 2.5 cars more done in a day if the part came to them. So again, we try to listen and consult and see how a simple product can kind of help these needs.
That's interesting, Aaron. I'm curious, do you have requests for the robot at the back of the house? If it's providing that support around just actually moving physical goods, I know you're focused on front of house, but do you also have that activity in the back of the house?
Yeah, we do. We have some weight constraints with our current model. So when we think about hotel pans and sheet trays and things like that, we would need a larger format product. We work in some buffets that we shuttle just hotel pans out back and forth, and kind of you have a buffet attendant that lives out there, and then we can kind of be the A to B solution. We also work in some airport lounges where we actually don't run food at all, but we collect dirty dishes. And a lot of these airport lounges, after the pandemic, they're switching back to actual china or melamine plates because their paper cost, as many of you guys probably know, is sky high. So we're helping collect these dishes and providing a little bit of ease on the operator's cost.
Excellent, thank you. So I want to unpack this, idea which you both addressed, which is robotics and automation really help with labor. And we know labor has been a challenge for restaurants. Even, I know it's been heightened by COVID, but even pre-COVID, I remember having these conversations, I think, on this very stage. How do we get more people interested to be working in restaurants? And I think the industry has done such an interesting job of, trying to provide incentives and different types of work structures to attract talent and to attract and to retain talent. But can you comment on just some of the concerns people have about implementing robotics in front of house and back of house, and what you're hearing from a lot of the customers and the community at large about, the shift to robotics.
Yeah, it's definitely top of mind. Whenever you bring a robot into a restaurant, immediately the first thing that anyone asks is, how does this affect me? How is this going to change my day-to-day? How is this going to change my job? And what we see is actually folks are, by and large, very excited. And they actually see this as really a big benefit, which is, I was actually really pleasantly surprised when I saw this, because it gives them an opportunity for career growth in a way that they didn't really have before. So it was, instead of doing the same thing over and over again, here you can learn a new skill. You have this new tool that now you are producing more, you're more valuable. And it also just changes up the day-to-day activity in a way which ended up being very positive. But all that being said, it's definitely a big change to the operation. And the most important thing we found when implementing automation at our customers is you have to address the change management from the very beginning. It's not enough to say, hey, we're going to just try this robot. It's that we're really changing our entire process here because we're going to add this automation tool, which is going to let us do things in a very different way than we had done before. Jobs are going to change. You're now doing something different. But at the end of the day, it ends up being a big positive because you could do something that you were unable to do before.
Yeah, I totally agree with that point. I think when we have this conversation a lot within our four walls, and we think about it as there's two different people that we impact. We impact the actual employees that are working there every day, and we impact the end user. And they both have two different views on implementing robotics, right? So starting with the actual workers, we need to kind of show them that we're friend, we're not enemy when we come into these places. We're not here to replace you. We're actually, I've worked as a server for many years, carrying the football trays and the diner style service and walking like 3 miles a day, tracking your steps. I know many of you probably have done the same. And it's rough. And what we do is, if you are a good server and you really like your job, you like talking to people, you like selling food, you like getting tips, because that all works out. And we go in and we kind of say, look, pretend like Servi is your little buddy, always helping hands. You can stay on the floor, you can take orders, you can sell that beer that you might have missed because you're in the kitchen looking for your food. And when we do this, we can consult our way through the end users, the actual button pushers, and they love it. They're not walking long distances, they're not carrying trays. They get to just focus on the interaction, the order taking, the payment process, the joking around with your guests. And when we talk about the customers, it really just depends on the type of restaurant we're in. So Lauren asked, going back to that last question, fine dining is probably going to be the last place that picks this up. People pay for service, a lot of human touch points, like a lot of intimacy just in the dining experience where, robotics doesn't necessarily fit just yet. But depending on some of these casual dining restaurants, it's a cool novelty as well. And some of our owners love the novelty. It brings in customers and just creates a memorable experience.
I'm curious, how long would you say the adoption of this technology really takes? Like, as you're working with your clients to sort of, implement the robotic arm and sort of the, movable robots, how long does it take people to really get used to them? And what is, I want to call it the friction that you anticipate, that you kind of help restaurant owners and chef owner operators through? Can you just talk a little bit about that period of time where, okay, the robot is here, and now what?
I mean, it's a great point that we see definitely, like, the time it takes to get the robot up and running is completely different from the time it takes where people don't just come up, stop, stare, watch the robot, take a 5-minute break and then go back to what they're doing. And Well, hopefully that almost never wears off, because it's just really fun to watch the robot work, and it's kind of like a crazy idea that it's able to do what it can do. But we see basically immediate benefit, like same day production from the robot. So installing one of these in your kitchen is actually very, very easy to do, since it fits on top of existing kitchen furniture. And really the hardest part is getting it connected to the internet, which is no joke. That can be hard in restaurants. The Bear Robotics guys are laughing in sympathy. But the technology today is actually, it's so much better than it was even a year or 2 years ago. It's really easy to get something like this actually up and running in a kitchen. But the change and the operational change, which is I'm sure what you're alluding to here, is the hard part. And it's definitely just a very different. It's just so strange to see a robot in your kitchen.
Yeah, all good points. We have, I think we have a lot less moving parts, and we see, typically, to answer your question simply, usually in like 2 days, it's picked up and we get our reps in, we like to call it. We pay a lot of attention to what we call the deployment process, and we're very hands-on. So we don't ship a robot and just say, hey, good luck, plug it in and figure it out. We're pretty much on site for 2 whole days. We train the team. We want people to feel comfortable with it, so we simulate like a day-to-day operation. We run some test runs, and we figure it out. We take questions, we teach everyone how to operate it. And then for the rest of it really takes us probably 2 hours to deploy, depending on the restaurant size. And then we kind of just sit back in the dining room and watch. We train on the spot. We see someone might be struggling with this. One thing we hate to see is like a server following a robot out with the food. Yeah, I want to pull my hair out. The purpose is do something else while the robot's running the food. Go make sure water glasses are full. Go take table 10's order. Maybe go check out table 12. But that's kind of the adoption piece that we're talking about, that takes some time just to get comfortable with your new friend in the restaurant.
There's so much truth to that. The idea that staff watch the robots, like that is the hardest thing to train, is that you say, no, the robot is now doing what it's supposed to do. You don't have to watch it. Go do something else. Like, it's your new assistant. It's doing its job. But that is really the hardest part.
Well, there is an entertainment factor, I think, here, which is fun, and it makes the restaurant experience more engaging, which isn't a bad thing, because you get people hanging around more and sort of observing the environment that they're in. And I wonder if you've seen any kind of creative, fun ways that people are using the robots that kind of enhance that capability that they have, which today is still very novel, right? People aren't used to seeing them. And so are you seeing any restaurants do creative things around their implementation?
Yeah, I think the thing that we've been most surprised about is the recipe creativity. So once people realize that they have this tool, they'll come up with new recipes and ways to use it to make product that we're fundamentally not the chefs, which is very, very important. Like, the robot makes your recipes, and seeing the behavior of people when they have a new tool, I think it's kind of like Photoshop for chefs, right? You give a chef a tool and they say, oh wow, I can do all these things that we never thought of, which is absolutely just wild. Like, we had a chef who's just looking at it, he's like, oh yeah, okay, that's my pasta robot, okay, that's my ramen robot, and he's just riffing through all of these different things that he's going to do with it, and we're like, okay, great, like, we've got, that's great, let's talk about getting you some more robots now.
Yeah, I love this question, because we try to empower our users to think outside the box. And like a simple thing, we never imagined that our robot would be a host or hostess. But if you think about a host or hostess role, this is actually something that a customer was like, hey, we want to do this. And we're like, sure, we could do it. The problem was the host was at the front, they were taking phone calls, they were stapling to-go bags, they were seating people, and they were also dealing with people picking up food and the third-party aggregators, DoorDash, Uber Eats, picking up their food. So if you think about those tasks, there's so many things happening. And what this restaurant did was they literally programmed the robot to take people to their table. Simple task. They put a couple menus on. They had a party of 4 come in. They looked at their POS screen. Oh, I got a section 2. I have a table of 4. Boom, boom. And the robot, the cool part is we can control the voice. So Lauren said before, we could customize prompts when it gets to a table, when it's traveling to a table, when it leaves the table. We had a retirement home that had like a pasta night a couple weeks ago, and they called one of our techs that day, and they're like, hey, I want it to have an American-Italian accent. So we programmed it through our software, and it said, please, take your food, like Mario. So we can do anything like that, and that's where the creativity kind of comes into play with serving.
That's a great example. Thanks for sharing it. It does remind me of the company that I mentioned earlier, Open City, which is doing drive-through AI and voice automation, and that opportunity to really reflect. I think the language, the preferred language of the customer is, I think, actually builds more connectivity within the restaurant than anything. At least that's what the experience of this company has been when driving through and you hear someone that's speaking the same way that you may. And here in the United States, as we all know, down south they may order things differently than they do up north, and they just the way they speak, the words they use, it can be very different. And so being able to mirror that is a really cool feature, and I think builds some of this connectivity that maybe the community in hospitality is worried that you lose with some of this automation. So curious about cost. How have you thought about the development of pricing around these products? And I'm just sort of curious with regards to that. What is the maintenance? What is the energy usage like? At baseline, I think about the cost as being something that replaces what you would pay a human, but there are added costs that humans don't necessitate. And so, can you talk a little bit about how these robotics are priced?
Oh, it's a great question, and we think for our customers that they should see immediate ROI, basically day one. Like, we want them to take the robot and then be able to see basically that day, oh, I sold X amount of new product. I now have made more money than I would have otherwise. As far as, so I'll break down the question piece by piece. We work with a standard 120 volt outlet, so it can plug in exactly where the refrigeration unit or the steam table was. The energy usage of the robot is about a third of a refrigerator, so it's actually really quite energy efficient, and has a pretty small overall impact to the total operational cost. We think that it's very, very important that maintenance is completely taken care of for the customer. So we handle all customer support, maintenance, everything. It's a white glove, because the last thing you want is your new assistant to be broken down or something like that. So we take care of all of that, which is covered in a monthly fee. And that way you never have to worry that the robot's not working. Like, we want the robot to be basically working through a full shift every day, because that's the way that you as the operator make the most money. Did I got all of it? Okay.
Yeah. Oh, any maintenance? Was there any?
So the maintenance is all covered in the monthly fee. So the typical pricing for the robot is either you can just lease the unit, so you don't pay anything up front and you just lease it, or you can actually purchase the unit where you own it and then you pay a monthly lease fee or license fee.
Thank you.
Yeah, so very, very, very similar answer. To Dave's point, it's our goal to make things as simple as possible. Power restrictions, you don't need any electrician to come in. We plug into any kind of outlet. We tell people all the time, if you could plug a toaster in, you could plug Servi in. When it comes to the price piece, we also want to simplify that, and I think we're seeing now, we're etching into the world of RaaS, which is Robot as a Service. We've seen it as Software as a Service. Everyone here probably has dozens of subscriptions on their own, and when we break it down, we try to break it down to a daily cost. And like another thing similar to that David said is we like our customers to see the value on day one. Our robot costs probably around $25 a day, depending on the operation. And if you are an operator here, judging by where you are in the region and labor constraints, you're probably being pushed against the wall to go above $15 an hour for a certain staff, depending on what we're talking about. And again, it depends on the restaurant style, the type, and the market. But again, pretty much 2 hours of actual labor pays for our robot in a day. And we also sell it outright. I want to hit on the support piece and the maintenance, because that's one of our biggest differentiators and something we're really passionate about. David had a good point. Once you implement this into your workflow, it's one of your staff, and we've all had enough call-outs and no-shows already. So if this robot that's integral to your operation goes down, you're handicapped for the day, and we make sure that never happens. So one thing that we produce for all of our customers is day-to-day like data and analytics. We monitor key performance indicators like how many deliveries do we do in a day, how much weight did we carry, how much distance did we travel. If we see one day that the robot was not used, it's a red flag. We call the customer, we figure out what's going on, and we try to get to the bottom of it. Our remote support team, they're absolute rock stars. I joke all the time, I tell people if you have a problem, you're going to call, and you're not going to get a robot to fix you. You'll get someone who's local to your restaurant to fix the robot. And 99% of our issues are fixed like within 30 seconds on our support line. So we remote in, we say, oh, the robot's lost or something like that. It's not a hardware issue. We don't have a lot of moving parts. So our support team and our system is really cool.
Oh, I wanted to build on that. That's great. Really great points. The idea of internet-connected appliances is really so powerful, because that means the support team knows exactly what's going on. And I can't stress enough that we've all had ovens break or pieces of equipment go down, and the first issue is you don't know what's wrong. But the beauty about robots and automation is they really give so much information back to the support team that that 30-second point is so true. It's all like most of the issues can be solved even before the customer knows there's a problem, which is very different.
And who's managing typically the robotics? Is it the general manager? Is it the head chef in the back? In the case of Dexai, who is sort of that person that is on the other side speaking with your company, saying, "Hey, this went down. I need your help." Blah blah blah.
So we train operators. So whenever any kitchen we go into, we do a training for the staff, and they actually learn the skill and become a certified operator of Alfred. And then they're the ones who are on the other side. So usually that's cooks with some experience, and they may not be the most tech savvy to begin with, but we have a touch screen, a display. It looks very similar to Survey's. And if you can use a phone, you can operate the robot. But very critically, it's not somebody who has a lot of technical skill. It's really somebody who's a chef first and operating a robot second.
Yeah, again, very similar answer. If you could use a phone, it's very simple. We try to make it as simple as possible. No one wants to add another layer of complexity to their restaurant. It's not needed at this time. It's probably not needed ever. So we try to hit every level. So ownership down to, so we train all over. If we're operating as a busser assistant to collect dirty dishes, we train the GMs, we train the managers, the supervisors, the front of house supervisors, the dish guys, people that are in the dish pit. We try to hit all levels, because whoever it's going to impact, we need to talk to make sure that they see the value of the tool and also know how to use it. Yeah.
Well, I know we're coming to time, but my one last question was just advice that you have for restaurateurs that are thinking about implementing the robots, curious to try it out. From your perspective, how do restaurants need to show up, and how do restaurateurs need to show up when engaging with companies that are in the robotic space?
I really think an open mind is the most important part. So as long as you're committed to finding efficiency and changing, making small changes to your operation and really being 100% sold that this is going to work, we find success whenever that's true. So it's really all about I think attitude, because the hard part isn't the technology anymore, which is really a great thing to be able to say. That it's not like the robots are there, they work, they do what they're supposed to do. The challenge is really how do you make that fit into a restaurant workflow, and how do you make sure that the operation adapts and becomes resilient?
Yeah, I second that. I think open minds, being flexible to opportunity and change, and just be creative with thinking, I wonder how I can do this a little differently, or how can I flex my staff? Like I said earlier, the more pliable you make your workflow, the more survival you'll have as an operation. I think everyone knows that. It's ever changing out there, and it's really brutal. I know the stat 10 years ago was 80% of restaurants don't survive, and it's probably worse now. So you really have to be on your toes and explore things, and I'm probably talking to plenty of people who know this, but yeah, just being flexible, open to change, and having these kind of conversations and testing things out.
Well, thank you both. Does anyone have questions for our panelists here?
So I have a firm that does finance for restaurants, so I'm going to jump straight to the numbers. Do you all have any use cases or case studies showing tangible, reduction in labor costs, for example, on your website? Or if you can just talk about that a little bit more, I'd love to get what you're seeing in terms of when it comes to the financials.
Yeah, happy to chat more detail, but a good rule of thumb is roughly 30 to 50% reduction in labor cost on a per unit item that you're preparing.
Yeah, and same here. We, depending on the vertical, it's a little different. Like when we talk about residential, like senior living and senior care, we see like a whopping, we have a lot of case studies out there. They actually, ironically enough, land in the same percentage range, 30 to 50%. But in restaurants, it's a little harder to nail that down. It gets a little hard dealing with restaurant owners and figuring out what their overhead is and drawing the actual conclusions. So we make a lot of assumptions. But we also just had like a 27-page white produced out of California for a large organization, and I can share that with you on the side. But it goes deeper than actual financial savings too, because when you track customer satisfaction and retention, and there's different metrics that really prove to bring in more business, and those are some things we're trying to pull on.
Other questions?
What about life expectancy? How long does it last?
Oh, for the robots? Yeah, so we're a new company, so we don't actually know yet because we haven't had any die, but we expect about 10 years for the actual hardware, and the software is continuously getting updated. That's one of the things that comes with the license is continuous software updates.
Yeah, this is a great question, so thank you. I think with our particular product, so we have robots that have now been out there for, I think, a little over 3 years. But similar to, I bet we have a lot of people that have iPhones. It's like 10 years ago, you might have bought a phone flat outright, but now it's like everything, again, is a service. And the new one comes out, you swap it out, and you get a new one. I think that's probably the area that we're going to be edging into. As David had a good point. Software is always changing. We push upgrades automatically, which we get to use the product in different ways, and we get to overcome more. But the hardware, once that changes, we envision with like a robot as a service model, we'll just be swapping and upgrading as the product evolves.
Just a quick question about the salad robot. What's the capacity? How many salads can it make an hour?
Yeah, it depends on the number of ingredients. So a good rule of thumb is somewhere between 25 and 30 an hour per robot.
Do you typically have just one robot in the back of house?
No, that varies wildly. So for large-scale productions, we would look at 4 or 5 to do, like if you're making 1,000 a day or something like that. But in smaller restaurants, we think a good rule of thumb for a successful installation is you want to do at least 100 units a day. And if you're making 100 units, 100 covers of something that the robot can make, then that's a really good use case.
Aaron, how many restaurants are you typically seeing per average restaurant location, or how many robots are you typically seeing per average restaurant space?
Yeah, that also varies a lot. So a lot of times we get this question like, all right, I have 100 seats. How many robots do I need? It depends on the velocity in the kitchen. So like we're in Buffalo Wild Wings. We have a couple like private franchisee locations, and that's a turn and burn restaurant. Like we got wings flying out of Expo constantly, and we need a robot always there to run food. So we got 2 to 3 at each of those locations. We have some locations that use one for food running and one for busing simultaneously. So you have one looping around the dining room, helping servers just dump their dirty dishes so they don't have to walk a single plate back to the dish room, which is a huge waste of time. So it really depends on the type of operation and how much you're trying to use them, but usually like 1 to 3.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm just curious, what would you say are the next sort of frontier of automating the kitchen? Sort of well beyond into the back of the house, like moving from plate creation into food prep, or beyond like plate busing, things like that, but also just, and what might be the challenges of that in the future?
So we're always rolling out new tasks for our robot. So right now we have basically assembly. So Alfred is making meals from prepared ingredients, but we're rolling out grill and fryer, so to handle stations. Then prep, as you say. We've gotten tremendous interest in dishes. We haven't promised a dish product yet, but lots of people are interested in dishes. I think one of the big benefits of a flexible robot arm like what we've built is that it can adapt to many different tasks. So it's cuisine independent, so it can do salads, ice cream, burrito bowls, everything, topping pizzas. All of that is with the same hardware, and we see a lot of demand for things like assembling crudité or fruit cups, or even just individual portioning. So I think the prep and the staging is probably going to be the next thing that is immediately rolled out, because there's so much demand for that. Like anybody who's portioned 200 cups of hummus knows that they just want a robot to do it next time.
Yeah, and in terms of our kind of vision too, is I think building off what David's saying, the next level I believe is when all these different systems start talking to each other. So working in conjunction with Dexai to actually pass on a to-go bag onto Servi to take to a pickup window or something like that. Like that'd be like a step one. I think going further and further for our personal product. The big thing that's going to break the logjam is going to be bringing back room service and delivery to hotels and casinos and multi-level delivery. And it's something that we're going to be working on this year towards next year. We actually have a product that's in the pipeline that is going to integrate with elevators. So if you are in a high-rise in New York City and you order Starbucks from DoorDash to your cubicle, we hope to eventually have a robot. DoorDash loads it in the lobby, goes up to the 50th floor, pulls right up to your cubicle. You punch in through an app. That's my coffee, and you take it. And we can do that in many different ways: towel, pillow delivery in hotels, food delivery, anything really that you can imagine.
Yeah, the dream here is to go from you order on your phone, go straight to the point of sale system, to the robot, passed off to another robot, and you get your food without anybody having looked at your order.
Well, I think that was a fantastic last question. Now, before we part, where can people visit you on the show floor?
Yeah, so feel free for Bear Robotics. We're here. We actually have 2 booths. We're all the way at the front. You probably walked past some robots buzzing around. That's booth 205. We're also right here. I'll be at Trimark booth. We're partnering with Trimark. And feel free. We have 3 robots here today. We got a lot of staff that can answer any questions, and we even have some like show price discounts too if anyone's interested.
Yeah, and come find us at Dexai.com.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. Thank you all for joining, and please do feel free to ask the panelists questions if you have any others lingering. But very much appreciate the event, and hope you have a great rest of your show.